Good morning, and welcome to Seattle Atheist Church. Atheist, agnostic, free thinker, whatever you like to call yourself, you are welcome here. At Seattle Atheist Church, we call ourselves an atheist church because you will never hear anything supernatural promoted from the podium. Our church is founded on the principles of scientific naturalism and secular ethics. Truth claims are attempted here, and we stand ready to revise our thinking in light of new information. We attempt to be excellent to all conscious beings, and we believe in good because good works in non-mysterious ways. If that sounds good to you, then you are probably in the right place. I want to say thank you to people who came out to see Mr. Rogers. If you didn't see it last night, I highly recommend it. What a wonderful way to live a life. On the 21st of October, we're going to have pumpkin carving. If you're interested in that, please sign up online, and details will be sent to you. Also, by the way, sign up for the next movie night. It happens the first Friday of every month. If you'd like to support the church financially, there's a jar at the back of the room. You can drop a bill in, or you can go to seattleatheist.church, where you can also see past episodes. I want everyone to know that there is a reporter in the room, so if you don't want your name used or whatever, and don't say your name. But anyway, it was actually her idea, and I'm glad she did let everybody know she's in the room. So the way we do this, the members ourselves give the talks, and then afterwards we have a discussion. So we welcome you, Ryan. Please come on up.
Hello, everyone. I'm here to talk today about how to communicate with people. Specifically, what can go wrong when attempting to. These are all lessons I could have used after the election when I tried to argue with voters of the opposition party. Not only was it information siloing, we all get our information from different sources these days. It's also misinformation, potentially propaganda. It was also a basic lack of conversational skills on my part, as well as assuming that my audience knew all the facts that I did. It should also be mentioned that most audiences don't respond well to having facts presented to them. This is not optimal for humans, essentially. We take information better through stories, but that's a talk for another time. So, as a reminder, be respectful. The goal is not to win the argument. The goal is to have a conversation, listen, learn, educate, and communicate ideas. Ask questions rather than making assertions. You want to guide your conversational partner into coming to the same conclusions that you did on your own. Remember, this is where the lack of information and or misinformation comes into play. You either need to inform them of facts they are unaware of, or deconstruct bad logic. This takes time and a willing partner. Most people will not be interested, and there is no point in forcing them. This can be frustrating, but you can't force anyone to listen. It's also important to note that different people prioritize different values and base their logical foundations on axioms that you may not share with them. This may also account for the different conclusions that you and your conversational partner come to logically. I want to point out cognitive bias is very closely related with my talk today. It's called the curse of knowledge, and is defined as a cognitive bias that occurs when an individual unknowingly assumes the others have the background to understand. And that's what I'll be talking about today. So I'm going to read an article from the website lesswrong.com. It is recommended to me by Jack, and the article is posted on the meetup for those interested in sharing or reading later. The article is written by Eliezer Yudkowsky. Okay. Homo sapiens' environment of evolutionary adaptedness consisted of hunter-gatherer bands of at most 200 people, with no writing. All inherited knowledge was passed down by speech and memory. In a world like that, all background knowledge is universal knowledge. All information not strictly private is public, period. In the ancestral environment, you are unlikely to end up with more than one inferential step away from anyone else. When you discover a new oasis, you don't have to explain to your fellow tribe members what an oasis is, or why it's a good idea to drink water, or how to walk. Only you know where the oasis lies. This is private knowledge, but everyone has the background to understand your description of the oasis, the concepts needed to think about water. This is universal knowledge. When you explain things in an ancestral environment, you almost never had to explain your concepts. At most, you had to explain one new concept, not two or more simultaneously. In the ancestral environment, there were no abstract disciplines with vast bodies of carefully gathered evidence generalized into elegant theories transmitted by written books whose conclusions are 100 inferential steps removed from universally shared background premises. In the ancestral environment, anyone who says something with no obvious support is a liar or an idiot. You're not likely to think, hey, maybe this guy has a well-supported background knowledge that no one in my band has even heard of, because it was a reliable invariance of the ancestral environment that this didn't happen. Conversely, if you say something blatantly obvious and the other person doesn't see it, they're the idiot, or they're being deliberately obstinate to annoy you. And to top it off, if someone says something with no obvious support and they expects you to believe it, acting all indignant when you don't, then they must be crazy. Combined with the illusion of transparency and self-anchoring, I think this explains a lot about the legendary difficulty most scientists have in communicating with a lay audience, or even in communicating with scientists from other disciplines. When I observe failures of explanation, I usually see the explainer taking one step back, when they need to take two or more steps back. Or listeners assuming that things should be visible in one step, when they take two or more steps to explain. Both sides act as if they expect a very short inferential distances from universal knowledge to any new knowledge. A biologist speaking to a physicist can justify evolution by saying it is the simplest explanation. But not everyone on Earth has been inculcated with the legendary history of science, from Newton to Einstein, which invests the phrase simplest explanation with its awesome import, a word of power, spoken at the birth of theories and carved on their tombstones. To someone else, but it's the simplest explanation, may sound like an interesting but hardly knockdown argument. It doesn't feel like all that powerful a tool for comprehending office politics or fixing a broken car. Obviously, the biologist is infatuated with his own ideas, too arrogant to be open to alternative explanations which sound just as plausible. If it sounds plausible to me, it should sound plausible to any sane member of my band. And from the biologist's perspective, he can understand how evolution might sound a little odd at first. But when someone rejects evolution, even after the biologist explains that it's the simplest explanation, well, it's clear that non-scientists are just idiots and there's no point to talking to them. A clear argument has to lay out an inferential pathway, starting from what the audience already knows or accepts. If you don't recurse far enough, then you're just talking to yourself. If at any point you make a statement without obvious justification in arguments you previously supported, the audience just thinks you're a cult victim. This also happens when you allow yourself to be seen visibly, attaching greater weight to an argument than is justified in the eyes of the audience at that time. For example, talking as if you think simpler explanation is a knockdown argument for evolution, which it is, rather than a sorta interesting idea, which sounds like someone who hasn't been raised to revere a comms racer. Oh, and you'd better not drop any hints that you think you're working a dozen different inferential steps away from what the audience knows, or you think that you have a special background knowledge not available to them. The audience doesn't know anything about an evolutionary psychological argument for a cognitive bias to underestimate inferential distances, leading to traffic jams and communication. They'll just think you're condescending. And if you think you can explain the concept of systematically underestimated inferential distances briefly, in just a few words, I've got some sad news for you.